Start stream. And the link is in the chat. See you guys on that side. And mute yourself here, please. Test, test, test. Yeah, you know, I'm not gonna lie. Not only can I feel the energy low today, yeah, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I can also feel the low energy inside. Just the air. All right. Hannah's like now the official #1. Oh, she just beat Alan like by a little bit. All right. So, I'm just going to go ahead and save this as stuff. Let's go ahead and start talking about synthesizers again. Just a quick review of what we did. Now, if you have the Ableton suite, you will be able to go into your instruments section in the browser, and there's a little plugin called Analog. If you double click it on a MIDI track, you'll see that the analog loads up at the bottom over here, just like an audio effect, right? It's an instrument, a virtual instrument. But this emulates a very basic synthesizer. Now, this is a 2 oscillator synthesizer because there's 2 layers to it. There's one on top. There's boom, boom, boom. And then there's one on the bottom. 1, 2, 2. Then they have LFOs, 1 and 2, and then a master section, right? Now, oh, by the way, if you are on the YouTube, you don't have to worry about getting on Zoom. Once it starts becoming competitive, I can't contain myself. That's funny. So for the purposes of this video, I'm just using the top layer, right? So you can see the very first portion, very first component of a synthesizer is called the oscillator. The oscillator is the component that generates the actual sound needed to be manipulated by the different other components, right? So in this case, you can choose which sound you want to start with. You can start with different shapes, like a sine wave, right? You can go for a sawtooth, which is a lot more aggressive, right? Or you have a square wave, which is a little bit more. You can hear a lot of those overtones are way harsher in this now. And then you've got random noise, right? So you have all these different shapes that you can choose from to start messing around with, because the oscillator is the part of the synthesizer that generates the actual basis signal or basic signal, right? This is also the section where you can change the octave or pitch of your sound. Right? Pretty cool. So you have octave. You can change pitch by octave, by semitone, or by sense, right? Then you have this little section below, which goes into the envelope, which we talked about it the other day as well. So this particular envelope is a pitch envelope, and it gives you 2 different parameters to mess around with. The one parameter is what is the initial pitch when you hit the key, and the second parameter is how long does it take to settle into its center key. So if I have a straight line, all that means is that when I press down a key, it starts at one pitch and it remains at one pitch the entire time, right? But if I move the first parameter up, right, this means that when I hit the key, it's going to start at a much higher pitch and then eventually come down to its center pitch. Right? Pretty cool. right? So you can actually start to get trippy with sounds in terms of like where they start. You can also determine how long does it take to go from that. How long is that slide from the initial pitch to the center pitch? You can shorten it or lengthen it, right? As opposed to it just being a flat pitch all the time. So that's the oscillator section. Next, you have the filter section, which is essentially your EQ section, where you can start manipulating the frequencies involved in the actual waveform. So you can see there's a bunch of different frequencies happening over there. And if you go to the pull down menu, you can choose from different types of frequency bands. So you could do, say, a high pass instead. So that cuts out all the low end. Or you can do a low pass, which cuts out all the high end. That's the most popular one, a low pass. Right? All the high frequencies are disappearing. This frequency knob here indicates the cutoff frequency. That's the point of which the low pass begins to decline, or the point after which the frequency amplitudes begin to decline. Now, you can also increase what's called the resonance, or the reso. So at the point of cutoff, like if you think about an equalizer, right? If you go to your EQ, right? A low pass looks like this, right? And the cutoff frequency is this point right over here. Well, a resonance refers to if you boosted that particular frequency. So check out what happens when I do that. So my cutoff is now like about 600, 640. If I boost the reso, right, you can hear that the 640 hertz starts to come through, plus some of the overtones, which is pretty interesting. So again, you can get some interesting tonal qualities from it. More interesting sounds, right? And then if you go back to the pitch and do like a upswing. Ooh, weird, right? Very, very weird. Or have I just been using C minor the entire time? I feel like I always just reach for C minor. All right. So there you go. You've got your oscillator section and your filter section. And then finally you have your amplitude section, which is pretty obvious for volume. And panning. Left, right. Now, what I just did there was I was moving the pan knob left and right manually. But if you wanted to set that up as an automated feature, you can use what's called an LFO. So if you engage the LFO, remember LFO stands for a low frequency oscillator. An oscillator generates sound. This is an LFO, an LF oscillator. So it generates a low frequency. And a low frequency can be in the form of a sine wave, can be in the form of a rectangle wave, or can be in the form of a sawtooth, or just a random noise. Now, this particular LFO, or LFOs in general, when we talk about LFOs, we're not listening to the actual sound of the LFO. We're using that motion of an LFO, that up and down motion of an LFO, and mapping it to a parameter of our choice. So, for example, when I was doing the panning, I was making it go left, right, left, right, left, right. What if I said, hey, LFO, I want you to map onto the pan knob, or the pan knob, I want you to map onto the LFO. So that means I want the pan knob to go left, right, left, right. left, right. So if you want the pan knob to follow the LFO, it's very simple. You go to your amplitude section, amplifier section, you go to pan modulation and turn up the LFO 1 on the pan modulation. You can hear it go left and right. Right? And how fast is it going left and right? That depends on the rate or the frequency of the LFO. If I increase it, getting very trippy, right? Now you could say, instead of having it slide through left and right, you could say just do a rectangle and just go, right? Pretty cool. Now, if you wanted to map that rate onto the project tempo, I would say change it from hertz to the note selection. And now you can choose whether to do it in quarter notes. Let's see. Right? Quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, whatever, right? And again, you can choose the different type of LFO. So it's kind of sliding between the left and right. You can also map volume under level modulation. And you can do a bunch of other parameters like, say, pitch mod. So instead of doing a straight pitch, you can have the pitch go up and down. Ooh, like something really tiny. That's really creepy shit. It's like some movie shit. Maybe I should play a minor. Or like a diminished. Or whatever. I don't know if that's a diminished. So there you go. LFOs. Very, very useful for actually creating variation within your synth sound. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is the envelope. So I'm going to reset everything back. So right now in your amplifier section, we have an ADSR envelope. Attack, decay, sustain, release. Attack determines when you press the key, how fast does it take for the amplitude to go all the way up to the maximum peak. That's the attack. How long does it take for it to get down to its sustain level? That's the decay. The sustain level is if you press and hold the key, what's the level that it sustains at? And then when you release, how long does it take to go to 0? That's the release. So attack, decay, sustain, release. Very, very important. And the basis of like how we define sounds. Something as fast attack like this. And when I let go, there's a bit of time before the sound dies out. Because the release is longer. Or if I have a very low sustain value, right, then you have a high amplified value at the very start with a fast attack, but then after a bit of time, it reaches a sustained level, which is much softer. So high, it comes down to a low level. Let go, it decays down. So you can start defining your sounds a little better. So instead of that, maybe I do a slow attack. A gradual build down to a sustained level. It's still going up. Now it's coming down. Or you can have something really fast and percussive that has absolutely no sustain. Right? Very, very sharp, because I killed the release time and I set the attack really fast as well. So ADSR curves are really important for understanding how to actually shape your sound, right? Now there's also an ADSR that you can apply to the filter section, which I think is really cool. So instead of having it done on the level of the signal, right? So it's changing. So if you can hear it, it's like the frequency knob is going up and then back down to staying and then letting go. Right? And I don't have to do that manually at all. I'm using the envelope to do all that stuff. It's pretty awesome. Now, that's the basis of the basis of the synthesizer, right? And you guys have plenty of synthesizers that you play around with, so I'm not going to really get more into it. But if you wanted to play around with it, I would say this is the one to play around with, because it's got basic functionality. You can get pretty cool stuff from it. Now what I do want to do is I want to record something. Oh. Hey man, link is in the chat. See you on YouTube. Should make I was gonna say we should make a better system, but we're back on campus, so what the fuck. All right, so let's record some audio real quick. Remember, to record audio, you go to an audio track. Make sure you have your input set correctly. Right now, mine's coming from an external input, my interface. I want it to be input 3. I'm going to hit record enable, and then I can record my voice. Man, I'm so tired today. Man, I'm so tired today. Man, I'm so tired today. Man, right? So what I do want to show you now is that if you go to a different MIDI track and go to your instruments and open up the Simpler plugin, you can drag not just this sample, but basically any sample you want into the Simpler. Now, I won't recommend full-on songs for this. Don't pull in a full... You can, but it's not recommended. And even if you do a full song, it'll only take a portion of the song to actually mess around with. So I would say either pick your samples wisely, or I would say cut up the song into the sections that you want and then load it into this. So before I drag this, I just want to show you just basically how it works. So if I go to my samples, I have some one-hit samples lying around, right? So this is an ARP. So this is a one-note audio sample. You can tell it's an audio sample because it's .aif. .aif is another lossless form of compression. You have WAV files, AIFF files. They're kind of lossless types of audio, right? But this is one note. I can drag this one note into the Simpler. And when I hit record enable on the Simpler, right, plays the note. If I drag the different note, say this one, it'll play that note. But remember that it's all mapping to the same C3 on my MIDI keyboard. So I'm playing the same note on my MIDI keyboard, but I'm playing the sample of whatever's loaded in here. So if I go back to this, right? So this is my sample. I have one sample loaded up. The cool thing is that if I change the pitch, if I play different pitches, it will adjust accordingly. Right? So I didn't have to load in a sample for every single pitch. Ableton already knows how to pitch shift all of these. Now the problem is that if you say, if I dragged in that sample and I press C3, man, I'm so tired today, right? That sounds like me. But then, man, I'm so tired today. That sounds like some freaky shit, right? But the other thing that you might have noticed is that it's slowed down, right? It's lower pitch. Man, I'm so tired. But it's so much slower. Man, I'm so tired today. Man, I'm so... Right? Much slower. And then the opposite is, if the original is, man, I'm so tired today. If I go up... Man, I'm so tired today. See? It's faster. So what does that remind you of? Pitch and speed. We talked about this with elastic audio. We talked about this with warping. But if you have pitch and speed that are not being applied, or rather, if you have something where pitch and speed are dependent on each other, then if you speed things up, the pitch goes up. And if you slow things down, the pitch goes down. Likewise, if you pitch things up, the speed goes up. And if you pitch things down, the speed goes down. But Ableton has a cool little feature in the sampler called warp. So when you warp it, man, I'm so tired today. Man, I'm so tired today. Right? So it keeps the speed the same, but the pitch changes. So you've made pitch and speed independent of each other using the warp. And again, underneath this, you can actually choose all your different types of algorithms. Man, I'm so tired today. Depending on what it is. Man, I'm so tired today. Right? So you can change your pitch without affecting the speed just by hitting the warp button. And again, if you go back to the single note, if you went into a recording studio and somebody had like a old vintage piece of equipment and it generated one note, that's all you would need. You could take that note, sample it, put it into Simpler, and you'd have a full instrument out of it. Now again, they're not perfect, but this is pretty close to getting like that kind of unique instrument sound. So right now we're on what's called classic mode of the Simpler, where it just plays the entire sample, right? Now, if I wanted to loop over and over again, I can hit loop and keep holding the note down. I can change the length of the loop. I can change where the loop starts. I can also change where the sample starts. So you can actually change where the sample starts versus where the loop actually happens. It's pretty cool, right? So that's where the sample and loop are the exact same, but if the loop was shorter and maybe say only looped at the very end, see how when I press the key, it starts at the beginning, but it only loops the section that I have in blue, right? You also have a clip gain here as well, but that's pretty self-explanatory. The next mode is called one shot. So that is, it doesn't matter how long I hold the key down for, even if I just touch it briefly, it's going to play the entire sample. See, in classic mode, as soon as you let go of the key, it stops playing the sample. But in one shot, right? Doesn't matter how long I hold the key for, it'll play the entire sample. Same with whatever sample that I load up here. If I'm in classic mode, man, I have to hold the key down to play the entire sample. I'm so tired today. Tired today. Tired today. Day. Today. But in one-shot mode,
Man, I'm so
I can hit it once
tired
and it'll play the
today.
entire sample. So one-shot is really for when you have like drum kits that only need to be hit once, like very briefly. Doesn't make sense for you to hold down those kinds of notes, right? But it can be used creatively if you wanted to, right? But the next mode is where the fun starts to come in. And this is the slice mode, where you can cut up different sections of the sample and have them trigger those slices. Now, what you need to know is, by default, it slices by transient, but you can do it manually, where if you set it to manual, you just double click on where you want those slices to be. Man, so it's like, so I'll put one here, maybe move this over there. Boom. 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 So now the one thing you have to remember is that the first slice is not C3 on your MIDI keyboard, it's C0. So you gotta go all the way down. Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. I'm tired. Today. Today. I wonder if I should put one more slice. Today. Right? So you can cut up this sample into whatever you want, and then you can get more creative, because then if you cut them up into proper sections, each note is assigned to a key on a keyboard, and you can go crazy in terms of like recording it. So for example, if I had, let's just get a very basic pattern going, right? So let's see. Yeah, let's do something like that. Let's do... Oh, the classic. And then... So... you have like a rhythm going, and then if you go to your actual simpler, you've already sliced up your sample. Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. Day. Today. Right? So you can get very creative with this stuff. And again, the coolest part is that I'm playing it on a MIDI keyboard. So what does that mean? It all gets recorded as MIDI data. So if I just record, it's going to record into the arrangement view. You already know this, right? Right? So if you look at the actual arrangement view, this is what it recorded. It recorded MIDI data, and if you solo it, you'll hear what I'm talking about. Man. Right? It's all I'm tired. Notes. Man, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired. Today. Right? And you can change these to whatever you want them to be. So instead of, man, I'm so tired. Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. So it's all MIDI data. Pretty cool, right? I think it's cool. Now, the other cool thing that you can do with, I'm just going to loop this because we need some loops. So, if you wanted to add effects, I'm tired today. All right, so you know how to add reverbs and delays and stuff like that. Now, within the actual simpler, what I didn't go over before is that they have its own built-in set of effects that you can apply. Now, just like the synthesizer where you have filter, LFOs, and an Adsr curve, same thing for the simpler. Now, you can see it at the bottom right over here. See frequency, filter, res, LFO, fade in, fade out, right? Now, in order to see it clearer, I always clicked on this little arrow so that you see the sample up here, and it's where it needs to be, right? But then you have, I'm going to turn off the reverb. Then you have a clear visual on your effects. So I'm just going to play this. I want to play here. So if I could play around with the frequency. I'm tired today. Right? Today. So you have your frequency and reso just like you did. I believe like there's some cool distortion stuff you can add too. I'm tired today. Right? Some cool shit that you can start to get into. It's pretty wild. Then you have your LFO section. You already know what an LFO does. And you can change certain parameters like volume, pitch, filter, and pan. So say I wanted to do volume. If I turn this up now. I'm tired. And if I choose my LFO to say, yeah, let's do 16th notes. I'm tired today. Maybe pitch. I'm tired today. Maybe do panic. I'm tired. And you can also change like from a sine wave to a square if you want it more digital. I'm tired. Right? I'm tired. Right? So everything that we learned with the synthesizers in terms of what you can control, like filter parameters, reso parameters, frequency. You can even add some drive onto it too, but you can also add an LFO to map to volume, pitch, filter, and pan. Really, really cool. Again, getting really, really crazy sounds out there. You also have your Adsr curve, which you guys are pretty familiar with now. So if I maybe turn off the LFO. So I can set it to have a slower attack now, to have it more curved out. Oh, but this is only for pitch envelope, it looks like. Let's see. Pan, reso, transposition. So let's see. If I do Oh, okay. So you got transposition just like you did. I'm going to turn this off. So I guess this is just for pitch envelope, so you can only change the ADSR of the actual pitch. I was pretty sure you could change the volume too. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh, there it is. There it is. So you can do a fade in, a fade out. Right, so you can have fast attack, slow attack for the actual sample. You can pitch the sample itself. Right? And then you have your basic volume controls, right? Now glide, I don't know if you guys know what Portamento is, but so tired today. This might work better with like a regular sample, but Portamento is where pitches slide up to different pitches. One pitch slides up to the next pitch, basically. Let me see if this works. What's going on? Why is this shit not working? Oh, because I'm in slice mode, like an idiot. So Portamento is like a... So I guess Portamento, it sounds a little bit more defined. You can still hear the transients, but glide is... It kind of slides up way smoother. And you can also define the time it does that. So if you press two notes, it kind of slides up. And if you press a higher note to a lower note, it slides down. So it's really cool what you can do with this. You can start to mess with different features of the actual sample that you're playing around with. All right, so before we get into anything else, let me just quickly go over some automation. So if you have your recording in the arrangement view and you want to do automation, the only thing is you have to make sure that this button is this button is engaged, the automation button. And then if you hit record, and wait for this vocal to come in. Okay. There it is. Let me do that one more time. So make sure this is enabled. Then you just have to hit record and go. If you want to see what exactly you're automating, we can get into that. If you go to this little section up here, there's a little button which looks like a line and two dots. Those are your automation lanes. Now, I want to look at the mixer and the delay knob. And then, if I hit play, I'm tired. I have to hit record enable for it to actually record. I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired today. So you see how it's already doing all that stuff? So voice teachers have strong opinions about Portamento. Oh, I'm curious about what they have to say. So that's really it to automation. You have to make sure that automation is viewable if you want to see it. But if you just want to record it, just make sure that you have this enabled and then hit record over here. Same thing for volume or anything like that. I'm tired.
tired.
Right? It'll draw the automation for the volume too. So, Sadie, I hope that makes sense in terms of volume and stuff like that. All right, so going back to the simpler real quick. So you have your sound that you can really mess around with.
Man, I'm tired. Man, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired today.
The cool thing about the actual simpler plugin is that you can right-click it and take it from simpler into a much more advanced sampling device called the sampler. Now, on the most part, it looks very similar to the actual simpler, right? It just looks like it has more features like where does the sample start? You have a start flag, end flag, but you also have some other cool features like, hey, do you want your root note to be C3 or do you want your root note to be something else like C4? So now if I play C3 again, it'll be an octave. Right? It'll be an octave lower. But some other cool features is you can play it in reverse. Right? You can also tell where you want the sample to start.
Tired today.
Versus where you want the loop to start. It's very similar to simpler in that way.
Man, I'm so tired today.
Right? But then it has this really cool sustain mode where if you, so for example, if you were to loop this. So if I press and hold the key, it's just going to play this over and over again because this is my loop section. But if you change the sustain mode to go, instead of playing it forward all the time, you can play it forward and backwards. And you can also have it stop so it doesn't actually loop anything, right? All right. So there you go. Sampler is basically this like much more advanced version of the actual simpler. Another cool thing is when you let go of the note, you can have it just stop, right? You can have it loop forward. So let me release loop. Man, why is it not doing that? Huh. For some reason my release mode isn't working. I'm not seeing it. But you can do this thing where like when you let go, it actually continues the sample or it plays it forward and backwards, depending on what you want to set it to. Again, you can set this to like a simple note if you want to as well. Do like a forward and backward kind of thing. It's pretty interesting. And then you actually have, actually before I get into that, you have a zone section, which I think more people are going to be familiar with the zone section than whatever. More people will be familiar with the zone section, but you can see that my little sample over here, ARP poly lead, is playing on every single key of the MIDI keyboard. Right? So every time I play, it's playing the ARP sample. Now, if I reduce this little bar, now it's only playing from C3 onwards. But if I play below C3, there's no sound. The cool thing is, now you can actually apply multiple sounds together. So if you sampled multiple instruments, right? So let's say if I have another instrument over here. bite-sized C3. Don't know what that is. If I drag this in, I have a new sample. I'm actually going to mute the first one. Let's do a fade as well. Right? So now I have two samples going at the same time. So you can layer multiple samples in here at the same time just to like have them work better. You can have your other sample in as well. Yeah, sure, I'll set C3. Right? Or you can do something else, like say, hey, I want all the notes below C3 to be just the first sample or the second sample, and I want all the other notes to be the other sample. So check this out. When I press below C3, so you can assign different sections to your different samples if you wanted to, right? Now within the actual sampler, there's other features that you can do. You have pitch and pitch envelopes, which we've kind of already gone over, but it's a little bit more detailed. You have your filter section, which we already know. You have your frequency envelope. But you can see there's a lot more functionality to it. Maybe let's loop it. So now not only is the sample looping, but the pitch envelope that you've applied on it is looping over and over again. You've got your volume ADSR. Obviously, it's not doing anything. But then in the modulation section, you have a choice of 3 different LFOs. So before we had one LFO for one section. Now you got like 3. So if you map this onto, say, something like volume. You can map a bunch of other things. You can map other parameters, like anything that you can think of. So within the actual sample select, we already talked about sample start, loop size, play forward, play backwards, panning. You can map all of those to different LFOs if you want to as well. So let's say I want to map this to, let's do loop length, right? Now watch what happens. No, that's harder to hear. But what's essentially happening is that you've assigned an LFO to the actual loop length that we had predetermined before. So if you have a defined loop, you can even say, okay, but I want the loop length to change as well. It's ridiculous how much detail you can get into in terms of like defining your sound. I thought we'd be able to see right? So you can get crazy with the sounds that you create from this. And again, this all came from one sample, right? What was the one sample we started with? We started with this guy. This sound came from this, right? Same thing. You can just record yourself saying one word and you could start sampling that into some crazy shit. Sa. Ba. Right? Could load that up as a sample. This is my voice. Right? I'll do it one more time. So for example, this is not C anymore, this is D. So if you go in to your audio track and record yourself saying something very simple, I would try to pick a pitch like da, so that way when you sample it you can change pitch. Na, na. Now obviously it sounds wrong because that's in D and I'm singing C, but what I'm trying to say is that if you load this up into a sampler, right over here, everything that I did you can apply to the actual human voice as well. It's pretty wild. Let's do forward and backwards. Let's change the pitch. Let's do a crossfade. Can we do a crossfade? Yeah, let's change the sample size. That's my voice. That's my voice taken through a sampler and had a whole bunch of stuff put onto it. See if we can do something like LFO1 rate. Damn, this is crazy. Okay, so Jesus Christ. Forgot how crazy this shit can be. So you have LFO 1, 2, and 3. And right, when you have LFO 1, let's take the example of let's do volume, and let's do like 16th note. Right, so it's doing 16th note volumes. But you can actually have an LFO mapped onto the rate. So instead of doing 16th notes all the time, it can go between 16th notes, quarter notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes. So in LFO 2, there's an option to change the LFO rate. Woo! So I'm not playing that, by the way. I'm just holding one note down, or 3 notes down. So that's fucking wild. I forgot that you can do that. You can have LFOs automate other LFO parameters. It's fucking crazy. LFO amount pitch, LFO amount filter. Yeah, it's crazy what you can do. Anyway, so the sampler is like a big brother to the actual simpler plugin where you can have much more defined capabilities. Right now, I don't think that you guys need to worry about sampler, but if you guys are into sampling, the sampler is a good option in Ableton. If you have Contact has a really cool sampling program in it as well. Yo, tell who? Yo, tell C. Stop stalking me. Classes start November 1st. Ads popping up my. Some think it's cheesy and go against composer's wishes. And some think that because there's the style of singing in a particular era. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, Portamento. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I know that there's some things that in the voice world, you know, if you go into different genres, something can be considered cheesy, like the classic vocal fry from, you know, everybody knows it from Britney Spears, like the "Oh baby, baby, I can't do it." Well, it's like "Oh baby," right? That whole vocal fry thing. In some genres, it's great, and in other genres, it's like very, very taboo, right? So I didn't know Portamento was another thing like that. Now we talking fire. All right. Now, right? So I have a little cool thing going on right here. And then the cool thing about Ableton is that if I right click, I can actually take this into what's called a drum rack, right? So everything that I just did to fuck with my voice, I have now mapped it onto a drum rack in Ableton, right? So if I go to so that's my voice that was really modified and all that stuff. Now let's go back to the other thing that I did, the simpler. Let's take this, chop this up into and let's actually just use that. All right, if we do this, map it onto this kind of thing. Maybe do that for have it loop. Right, whatever. You do all that stuff, and then you can map this. What you can do is you can put this into its own little simpler, and then you can map that again onto its own drum rack. And just like that, you create your own drum rack. Now, if you don't know what a drum rack is, it's very, very easy. You have a whole different set of keys listed out here, and to every key, you can assign your own little sample. So you can say that, hey, this guy goes over here. So now, C0. Oh, let me go back to this one. That's that sample that I created before, and that's assigned to C0. D, man, I'm so tired, is our other sample that we already did, right? Right? So every key you can put your own sample, and each little key that you have on the drum rack is itself a simpler or sampler, which you can then mess with indefinitely, right? So let me take one more example, right? Like so, go to our samples. Ooh. Let's assign this to E3, right? So E3 is in my, and you see how I loaded the sample into the drum rack, into a key of the drum rack, but that's actually itself loaded into a simpler plugin. And we already know what we can do with simpler plugins, right? You can have an LFO map to that. Let's do and we don't need the end of that. Right, so we have a drum rack with that note. And you can go all the way. You can fill up this entire drum rack to have each key be a sample that you can mess with. Jeetney Spears? Oh my god. Hey, I'm just telling you, when I was like, what was I? I must have been like 10 years old. Her first album came out. I think she was like young. She was like 20 or something. Oh man, I fell in love, dude. That was it. She had that cover with her just like, yep, 10-year-old me, man. That was it. I forgot the name of the album. But yep, I was definitely into Britney Spears for a while. I don't know what's up with her these days. I don't know what she's up to. She's still making music? But you get the idea of drum racks? Every single note on the actual drum rack can be a sample, which you can then mess with in the simpler UI. Very, very powerful stuff, right? So, yeah. Let's take it back to Zoom.